audience looks like. Utterly still.
The chandelier light catches the ice in his glass as he sets it down too hard. Around the table, 4 board members go quiet, chopsticks frozen mid-air. He looks at her, apron still dusted with flour from the kitchen. Like she's a stain someone forgot to wipe off the marble. 집안 어른들 때문에 가정부랑 결혼해줬더니 지가 무슨 사모님이라도 된 줄 아나 봐. He mutters to his cousin, low and fast, laughing through his teeth. I married a housemaid to please the elders, and she thinks it makes her a queen. His cousin snorts. Someone's phone buzzes, ignored. She doesn't flinch, doesn't blink, just refolds the linen napkin in her hands, corner to corner, precise as a blade. He doesn't know her name yet. Not really. He doesn't know her file number either. The one with his face on the cover, 3 years deep in a federal server. He thinks he married the help. He's actually sleeping 2 doors down from the woman who's about to end him. The house runs on silence. Not the silence of peace. The silence of a place where every sound has been accounted for, catalogued, permitted. Water pipes that hum at 6 a.m. because the staff wake early. The particular click of the east gate at 7:15, when the security detail changes shift and looks, for exactly 90 seconds, the other way. She has lived inside this silence for 11 months now, and she has learned to read it the way other people read newspapers. Her husband does not know her schedule. He knows her function. Coffee at 7. His shirts pressed by 8. A car ready when he decides, without warning, that he wants to be somewhere. He has never asked what she thinks about while she irons. He assumes, the way men like him always assume, that a mind occupied with linen has no room left for anything else. He is wrong in a way that will cost him everything. This morning, he takes his coffee standing at the window of his study, phone pressed to his ear, speaking to someone in Busan about a shipment that isn't a shipment. She moves through the room behind him with a cloth and a bottle of oil for the teak shelving. The posture of a woman who has dusted this exact room 300 times and will dust it 300 more. Her eyes move once, briefly, across the open ledger on his desk. A column of numbers. An account routing string, 16 digits, followed by a 4-digit access key scrawled in his own handwriting, because men like him believe a locked study is security enough. She does not slow down. She does not linger. By the time she reaches the bookshelf, the 16 digits and the 4-digit key are already filed somewhere in her mind. She has spent years training to hold exactly this kind of information. Untouched by panic, untouched by triumph, simply stored, the way a server stores data it hasn't been asked to use yet. 3 years ago, people who studied intelligence assessment for a living would have called her one of the sharpest analysts to come through the State Department's East Asia desk in a decade. She built profiles nobody else could build. She saw patterns in shipping manifests that read, to everyone else, like noise. And then, a man with the right friends and the wrong amount of money decided her competence was inconvenient. Falsified communications, a manufactured leak, a career erased in the time it takes to sign a termination letter. No trial, no appeal, just a closed door and a security escort to her own car. What nobody in that building understood, what nobody in this house understands now, is that she did not disappear. She retreated. There's a difference, and it's the difference that has kept her alive. Because before her name was scrubbed from a federal directory, it was written, quietly, in the founding documents of a logistics empire her grandfather built from 3 trucks and a warehouse lease in Incheon. An empire this man, her husband, her mark, has spent 3 years trying to carve apart, piece by piece, using shell companies and forged death certificates and a small army of lawyers who bill by the hour to make theft look like inheritance law. He believes the last heir died in a car accident outside Daegu. He has believed it long enough to build a fortune on that belief. He does not know he married her. She lets him keep believing it. Belief, handled correctly, is a tool sharper than any blade she was ever trained to carry. The marriage itself had been arranged the way these things are arranged in families that measure worth in shares and subsidiaries. A favor between his grandmother and a broker who owed the old woman money. A housemaid with no family listed. No history that anyone bothered to verify, because nobody verifies the histories of women deemed replaceable. She had made certain of that. Scrubbed records. Bought silence where silence needed buying. Walked deliberately into the one house in the country where she could watch this man's empire, her empire, being dismantled from the safest possible distance, inside his own walls, wearing his own ring, pouring his own tea. At night, when the house finally quiets and his breathing in the next room settles into the rhythm of a man who has never once questioned his own safety, she sits at the small desk in her sitting room and writes nothing down. Nothing on paper. Nothing that can be found. She holds the numbers in her memory the way she held them that morning. The account, the routing key, the names he says too loudly on calls, he assumes she cannot follow because his associates favor a regional dialect thick enough to lose an outsider in. She is not an outsider. Her grandmother was born 40 minutes from the man currently mispronouncing shipment codes into his phone in the next room. She has simply let everyone around her decide, on her behalf, what she is capable of understanding. It is a decision she intends to let them keep making for exactly as long as it's useful. Downstairs, a door closes. His security chief, back early from his rounds, the same 90-second gap at the east gate still open, still unguarded, still exactly where she mapped it 4 months ago, and has been waiting, patiently, for the right night to use. She closes her eyes. Not to sleep. To count the days. The study fills with smoke by midnight, the kind of low gray haze that comes from men who smoke because it gives their hands something to do while they lie. 5 of them sit around the low lacquer table, his 2 senior lawyers, his logistics chief, a banker whose name changes depending on which jurisdiction he's currently pretending to operate in, and him, at the head, jacket off, sleeves rolled, the posture of a man rehearsing a victory he hasn't earned yet. The documents spread across the table are labeled in 3 languages, and none of them use her name. They use a case number, a trust designation. A dead woman's photograph, clipped to the corner of a folder. The photograph itself 8 years old, and slightly wrong around the eyes. A detail nobody in this room has ever had reason to notice, because nobody in this room has ever looked at her closely enough to compare. 내일 새벽까지 남은 집은 전부 정리한다, he says, tapping the folder twice. We liquidate everything remaining by dawn tomorrow. His voice has the flatness of a man who has said this sentence, or one very close to it, many times before, and watched it work every time. 죽은 년 유산이고 뭐고 서류만 맞으면 아무도 신경 안 써. Dead woman's inheritance or not, paperwork's clean, nobody asks questions. The banker nods slowly, unconvinced by nothing so much as habit. 만약 상속자 쪽에서 뭔가 걸고 넘어지면요, he says. And if someone on the heir's side raises a flag. 이번 건은 액수가 좀 큽니다. This one's a bigger number than the others. 상속자 없다니까. His laugh has an edge that isn't quite amusement. There is no heir, I've told you. 3년 동안 확인 안 된 게 있으면 말해봐. 3 years. Name one thing we haven't confirmed. Nobody says anything. Nobody in that room knows the one thing that was never confirmed is currently standing 11 feet behind him, holding a tray of tea he did not ask for and will not remember asking for tomorrow, because men like him have never once in his life wondered where his tea comes from. She sets the tray down at the sideboard without a sound. Porcelain against lacquered wood, careful as a held breath. She could leave now. Every rule of this house, every rule of the role she has spent 11 months performing without a single flaw, tells her to leave now. She doesn't move toward the door. He believed his money and his muscle made him untouchable. He had no idea the architect of his ruin was standing right behind him. If you love stories where arrogance meets ultimate justice, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens in the next 60 seconds is the reason this whole quiet, patient game was ever worth playing. 라우팅 코드 다시 한번 확인해 보시는 게 좋을 것 같은데요. Her voice arrives low, unhurried, entirely without apology. You might want to check that routing code again. The room doesn't react at first because the sentence doesn't compute. The housemaid's voice, using the banker's own regional cadence, sitting in the air of a room that has spent 3 years assuming she understood nothing beyond instructions for laundry and tea. He turns first. Slowly. The kind of slow that comes from a man's brain refusing to process what his ears just delivered. Muorago? What did you say? She doesn't repeat herself for his benefit. She walks forward instead. 3 steps, unhurried, the same measured gait she uses when clearing dishes. Except now, every man at the table is watching her, the way you watch something that has quietly stopped being furniture. She reaches down, turns the ledger on the table to face her, and taps one line with a single finger, exactly where he tapped his own finger 60 seconds earlier. 이 계좌, 인천적 서브넷 아니에요? 3년 전 감사 이후로 폐쇄된 중개은행 코드예요. 이걸로 자산 옮기면 자동으로 미국 재무부 감시 시스템에 걸립니다. It's a defunct correspondent bank code, closed after an audit 3 years ago. Move assets through it and it flags automatically with U.S. Treasury monitoring. The banker's face goes the color of the ash in the tray beside him. He reaches for the folder, flips 2 pages, finds the code, finds the date beside it, and says nothing, because there is nothing correct left to say. Her husband hasn't moved. His glass sits forgotten on the table, the ice inside it gone still. He is looking at her the way a man looks at a familiar room after an earthquake. Same walls, same furniture, structurally unrecognizable. 당신이 이걸 어떻게? He starts and stops, because the question underneath the question is too large to say out loud in front of his own lawyers. How do you know this? How do you know any of this? Who let you into a room you were never given a key to? She meets his eyes without blinking, without the smallest concession to the 11 months of practiced deference she has performed in this house. The eyes down, 3 steps back, speak only when spoken to choreography, he never once questioned, because it was exactly what he expected from a woman he'd purchased the way he'd purchased furniture. 3년 전 감사 제가 진행한 거예요. Her voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. That audit 3 years ago, I ran it. The silence that follows isn't a gap in conversation. It's a structural failure. His lawyers glance at each other and then away, the way men do when they've just understood that whatever room they thought they were standing in has been, for a long time, a different room entirely. The banker's hand is still resting on the folder, frozen, as though letting go of the paper might make the last 60 seconds retroactively true. Her husband stands so fast, the chair behind him tips and clatters against the floor, the loudest sound the study has made all night. His face has stopped performing composure entirely, jaw tight, color rising, the particular fury of a man discovering all at once that every assumption holding his empire together has just been quietly, precisely, dismantled by the person standing closest to him the entire time. She doesn't step back. She has been waiting 11 months for him to look at her like this. It means he's finally seeing her. He is shouting before the chair stops rolling on the floor. Munjamga! Amudo Mosnaga! Lock the doors. Nobody leaves. His security chief is already moving, barking into a radio. Men converging from 3 different hallways with the particular urgency of people who have never once had to move quickly in this house before, and are discovering, in real time, how poorly it was designed for exactly this. She is already gone from the room, not running. She has never run in this house, not once in 11 months, and she does not start now. She takes the east corridor, past the kitchen, past the linen room where a coat, plain, unremarkable, chosen for precisely this reason 8 weeks ago, hangs on a hook nobody has ever thought to check. She takes it. She does not look back toward the study, where she can hear him still shouting, still issuing orders that will arrive 4 minutes too late to matter. The east gate changes shift at 7:15 every morning. It is 11:52 at night, which means nothing to the men currently scrambling through the house, and everything to her, because the gap she mapped 4 months ago was never about the morning shift. It was about the response gap. The 90 seconds between an internal alarm triggering and the perimeter guards receiving confirmation through a radio relay system installed by a contractor who cut corners on redundancy because her husband's security chief cut corners on the contractor's invoice. She found the flaw the way she finds every flaw, by reading what other people considered finished and asking what they'd skipped. She reaches the gate at second 41. The guard posted there is young, new, still operating on the assumption that the woman in the plain coat walking toward him with a small case in one hand is simply staff, sent out on some late errand nobody bothered to explain to him. She doesn't give him a reason to think otherwise. She nods, once, the exact nod she's given 100 times, crossing this same stretch of gravel with grocery bags, and he waves her through because his training told him to watch for threats coming in, not staff walking out. The car is waiting exactly where it was supposed to be waiting, engine already running, headlights off, parked in the dead space between 2 streetlights that she identified on a survey walk 6 weeks ago. The man behind the wheel doesn't ask if she's all right. He's read her file. He knows better than to ask a woman like her a question with an obvious answer. She gets in, sets the case on her lap. Inside it, an encrypted drive holding 11 months of financial records she has spent nearly a year quietly mirroring off his private servers. During the 2 hours each week, he trusts no one enough to let inside his study, but trusts her enough to ignore entirely. 3 years of laundered transactions, forged inheritance filings, shell company registries stretching from Incheon to a bank in the Caymans that exists mostly as a fax machine and a mailing address. They'll have the roads watched inside 10 minutes, the driver says. They'll have the roads he thinks matter watched, she says, and doesn't elaborate, because she already picked the route, and it was never one his security chief would think to guard. Behind them, the house lights up window by window, a slow-motion panic dressed up as competence. She doesn't watch it in the mirror. She has already spent her last minute of interest in that house. The federal courthouse annex on Foley Square doesn't announce itself. It is 2 months later, the first genuinely cold week of the season, and the hearing room on the 11th floor has the particular chill of a space designed to remind everyone inside it that comfort was never the point. Mahogany paneling, dark enough to swallow light rather than reflect it. A long table down the center, government seals mounted on the wall behind it, like a verdict already rendered. He sits at the defense side in a suit that no longer fits him the way it used to. Not because his body has changed, but because 2 months of frozen accounts and seized properties have a way of making even well-tailored fabric look borrowed. His lawyers flank him, 3 of them now instead of 2, And none of them are the confident men who once mapped out midnight liquidations over cigar smoke. They shuffle papers that no longer contain anything useful to shuffle. He still believes, in the stubborn way men like him always believe, that this is survivable. That somewhere in his contact list is a name that can make a phone ring in the right office and turn this whole proceeding into an inconvenience rather than an ending. He has spent 2 months testing that theory. Every call has gone to voicemail. Every favor he thought he'd banked has come back marked insufficient. The doors at the far end of the room are heavy enough that opening them takes a visible effort, and when they open, the sound carries through the whole space. A low, mechanical groan, followed by silence, followed by the click of heels on stone floor that has nothing hurried in it at all. She is not wearing an apron. The suit is charcoal, cut exactly to her frame, the kind of tailoring that doesn't announce money so much as assume it. Her hair is different, not styled for softness now, but pulled back with the precision of someone who has stopped performing anything for anyone. She carries a single leather folio under one arm, and behind her, 2 federal marshals and a woman in a gray suit whose credentials mark her as counsel for the Treasury Task Force, though everyone in the room understands, within about 4 seconds, exactly whose room this actually is. For the record, the presiding officer says, the government calls Director Naomi Ellison, lead investigator, Transnational Asset Recovery Task Force, and legal heir and reinstated principal of the Cho Logistics Group. His head comes up slowly at the name. Cho. Her grandfather's name, the one he spent 3 years erasing from filing cabinets and offshore registries, the one he assumed died on a stretch of road outside Daegu, along with a photograph that never quite matched the woman standing in front of him now. She sits. She doesn't rush the moment, doesn't reach for the folio right away, lets the silence in the room do the work. Silence has always done best in front of men, convinced their own voice is the only one that matters. Then she opens it and slides 2 documents across the table. An asset forfeiture order, and beneath it, an indictment carrying more counts than his lawyers will be able to summarize in a single sitting. His hands don't move toward the papers. His eyes do, briefly, then return to her face, searching for something he can still negotiate with, and finding nothing there but the same composure she wore every single day she poured his tea. Igeo, he says, and his voice has lost the register it carried 2 months ago, the ease of a man who never once doubted his own permanence. Ijeda mwobniga? What is all this? Dangsin huesayeo, she says, evenly, in English now, for the record, for the transcript, for the room. Je halabeojiga mandishin huesayo? It's your company, my grandfather's company. He opens his mouth. Nothing useful comes out of it. One of his lawyers reaches for the indictment, scans the first page, and goes still in the particular way of a man realizing the ground beneath the entire defense has just been removed. She leans forward slightly, just enough that only he registers it, her voice dropping to something quieter than the room, quieter than the transcript will ever capture. I told you 2 months ago, Mr. Kim. A pause, unhurried, exactly as long as it needs to be. You should be very careful who you ask to clear your tea. He says nothing. There is nothing left in him built for this particular silence. By spring, the Cho Logistics Group operates again under its original name, its original mission, its warehouses in Incheon running at capacity for the first time in 3 years. Her mother's medical debt, the debt that first pushed her toward the kind of desperate, invisible work that let her disappear into a housemaid's uniform in the first place, is gone, settled the week the estate cleared probate. Her younger brother starts his 2nd semester of tuition-paid college in the fall, a fact she mentions to almost no one, because the people who matter already know, and the people who don't were never owed the story. She keeps her federal post. she keeps her grandfather's company running under people she trusts, herself stepping back into the shadows of oversight rather than the spotlight of ownership, because visibility was never the goal. Justice was. And justice, done properly, doesn't need an audience to be complete. He is currently serving the first 18 months of a federal sentence that will, by the time appeals and asset hearings finish grinding through the system, likely stretch well past a decade. He has not spoken her name publicly since that hearing room. There isn't much left to say. When power blinds a man to what is right in front of him, his fall is always absolute. What would you have done if you held the keys to his empire the entire time? Let me know in the comments below.